You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have.
On my travel to Africa, I traveled by Ethiopian Airlines, and Ethiopian Airlines is one of the best airlines in the world and one of the best in Africa. And Ethiopian Airlines is an airline that actually has its origin in the Black Eagles. The Black Eagles was African Americans after Ethiopia was invaded by the Italians. And the Emperor Haile Selassie had to flee from Ethiopia into Europe, and particularly Britain. He then called upon the world to help him return to Ethiopia to remove the Italians. African Americans actually, because of, again, their knowledge of Ethiopia and the importance, actually rallied to, in fact, he formed what is called the Ethiopian World Federation. In fact, there was a branch in Harlem, New York, and so brothers who had learned to fly actually went and helped him establish an Air Force. And out of that Air Force came the Ethiopian Airline, one of the best in the world. In fact, Ethiopians actually have some of the best mechanics in the world right now flying those airplanes. From Ethiopia, Ethiopian Airlines took me to Accra, Ghana, and from Accra, Ghana, I had to get another airline because Liberia has experienced more than 14 years of civil war, so you can't just fly directly into Monrovia. The airport was destroyed and all that. So, but this is a regional airline called Bellevue, and it's owned by a Nigerian. So Nigerians do have money, you know, they own airlines. This airline flies throughout West Africa and flies all the way to India as well. Bellevue flew me from Accra, Ghana to Monrovia. And again, one of the fascinating things about flying African airlines, it reminds you of your culture, because you have stewardess and pilots who are Africans flying these planes. And in fact, in the case of Bellevue, I actually ate Liberian food on the plane. I mean, you don't be eating like, you know, African food on planes. So I ate Liberian food on Bellevue, so I want to make sure that I remember that. This is the Black Star Square in Ghana. And I told you we're celebrating the 50-year anniversary. Black Star Square is one of the central places in Ghana. And in tribute to Nkrumah, you know, Nkrumah actually chose the Black Star from Marcus Garvey. I don't know if you know that history and all that. This is Kwame Nkrumah National Park, and if you know the history of Kwame Nkrumah, he was educated here at Lincoln University. He was exposed to Marcus Garvey's ideas about a United States of Africa. He had heard that idea before from Ghana because, in fact, a Liberian, Edward Wilmot Blyden, had proposed the idea. But I think when he came and saw African Americans really working on this idea of the United States of Africa, he was inspired and literally then took that banner back to Africa, and that's what we have, an African Union. It is out of the view of Kwame Nkrumah that we have this African Union. And so there's a national park to Kwame Nkrumah. This is his mausoleum in the national park. His wife was from Egypt. In fact, when I got there, she had just been buried in the mausoleum about 2 months. She had just died last year, and they took her back to Ghana and buried her in the mausoleum, Kwame Nkrumah. This is National Theater in Ghana. This is where this is where Jay-Z performed when he was there, you know, so. In the form of a boat, because the Ghanaians, especially in Accra, actually are very they're heavily influenced by the sea. The slave castle, Ghana has about 38 of these slave castles. This is where our, you know, African-American ancestors actually, you know, Ghana was one of the places. This is the oldest of the slave castles. This is Elmina. In fact, this slave castle is 500 years old. It's a structure that been there for 500 years. It started off not as a slave castle, just as a place of trading gold and grain and all that. And then when slavery came in, they became the dungeons. Perhaps some of our ancestors went through those doors. The door of no return. There's a fishing village right outside of door of no return. Okay? I told you Ghana, again, right outside the door of no return, you find this fishing village in Ghana. This is, again, another one of there are 38 of this. This is another castle called the Cape Coast Castle. Again, huge, massive structures. In the Cape Coast Castle, they had an exhibit showing the African-American connection, and you see the African-American connection, again, represented in the castle, literally reminding people that those ancestors that left here, this is what happened to them. And it shows you the African-Americans that actually came out of the experience. African unity, as I mentioned about Nkrumah being this visionary, but the African unity would never come into being if it was not supported by Emperor Haile Selassie, who was the elder statesman at the time in Africa. Nkrumah literally was pushing the idea, but a lot of Africans saw him as this radical firebrand. So the emperor literally had to endorse the idea for other leaders to see it as legitimate. And so then the two of them actually become the two key figures that brought African unity into being. Addis Ababa, seen as the capital of Africa, because we have a lot of headquarters there, UN and all that. Ancient. In fact, this is one of the fascinating things about Ethiopia is that it is modern but also ancient. When you get there, you know that you're stepping back in time almost. But Pepsi is there, you see. I'm actually looking at a part of downtown Addis. This is the African Union headquarters. And again, I mentioned that the African Union is headquartered in Addis. Also, the UN is also headquartered in Addis. So there's a lot of head of states and important activities, people flying back and forth into that city. Addis Ababa University is really one of the key universities in Addis. I could talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to move on. The Victory Monument, this is a monument that was erected after the Ethiopians, along with Africans and the British help, were able to defeat the Italians. I don't know if you know that. The Italians were defeated twice by the Ethiopians. Twice. Not once, but twice. So the historians know that. And so the emperor actually put up a monument to commemorate at least the last, we call it the Victory Monument. And I think that would end my presentation here, back in DC. All right.